didn't he? He changed dramatically.
Well, yeah, I think that most people do. We're not listening to the native people of Britain. We're not listening to people who are seeing the world change so quick. I mean, look at it with superstores and that and everything. You go through now and have to do your own shopping. I mean, we're not employing people to do that anymore. It's all done by big business who are making the money.
But in most of these cases, it's all our own fault because we are that stupid and we are that lazy. Because it's just a matter. Many times I've been in those situations in those shops and nobody served me and said, right, I'm bored, let's have a little fun here. Let's start a little mini revolution amongst the people in the queue. Nobody's interested. Maybe one person will talk to me.
Well, no, that's because most people are afraid to, and we're so dominated by entertainment on television. And most people are introverted.
Yes.
And it's just not good.
That's the same thing here. You find people who, listening to a conversation, they have very strong views about it, but they won't speak.
Well, or the ones that oppose you just want to scream at you. There's so many things we can't talk about here as well because they'll be calling you all sorts of things if you do. They'll assume that you're a bad person and that you're a neo-Nazi or some crap, when you actually just want to discuss things which should be discussed in the open. But the society doesn't want it.
That's right.
Those people who have decided the changes to make in our society.
Well, the worst thing about constantly using terms like racist and things
I know.
like that, it completely destroys them. They don't have any power anymore.
Well, that's good. Well, I mean,
but we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be basically bringing up racism. If you want to promote racism, just keep talking about it endlessly.
Yeah.
Whoever said that? Somebody said that.
Well, racism was a word that was coined in the. It's a cultural Marxist word. It never used to be there. It was coined, like a lot of these things, by one of these cultural Marxist people. All this stuff, it's twisted. I mean, and have you noticed with cultural Marxism and all that and the extreme left, even with their classical music, which is obscure classical music, which is screeching violin and then dun-dun with the piano, and then another bit of screeching and then somebody drops a can or something and then dun-dun, and then it goes on. There's no melody, there's no story to it. I mean, it's a bit like, good design is incredible, but a lot of modern art isn't even good design, it's shit. It's really rubbish. It's nothing inspiring about it, nothing lifts you. I've seen modern art. I saw before Tate Modern was built, in the old Tate, they had a small sculpture that was going to be made into a very large thing. And it was just pieces of metal, and it was inspiring. I don't know why. It was incredible. It was uplifting to look at it. Something about the shape and the design of it, and it's just incredible. And I just stood there for ages looking at it. I should have written down what it was called so I can have a picture of it. They never made the main sculpture, but there was something about it which was incredible. And that was kind of modern art. But so much, I mean, you go into the Tate Modern and the most amazing thing is actually the building.
Yeah, it's a good point.
The artwork isn't great.
Well, it's all inspired by death and decay, which is not very inspirational.
And grotesque, absolutely grotesque and ugly and offensive. And it says because art, it says an awful lot about what your society is.
So I would describe it as self-hating, loathing.
And they look at landscape paintings and that, which are now, traditional paintings and that, and they meant different things in their time than they do now. And we all think it's twee. Or, people used to make money by painting little cottages with flowers and things. And we were inundated with stuff because people made their money out of it. And it was pretty and twee, but it's pretty meaningless in some respects. But it's kind of better than some of the horrendous stuff that we see in the modern Tate and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
I worked in a place where they store art, not like White Cube. I looked at doing the job, but I decided not to. And there was a huge painting the size of a 2-story room of the close-up of a woman's private parts. And it was so big you didn't even know what it was because it was so huge. And that was a Tracy Ullman or someone like that. I don't think it was her, but it was one of these modern artists. Yeah. And it was pornographic. And it was on such a scale that you didn't know what it was. And we had people coming into looking at some traditional painting, and then they said we better put that somewhere else because they wouldn't want to be walking into that. But we had art from centuries ago, some really amazing stuff. Why have I become popular and I'm being filmed when I've got a cold? What's made me so popular?
too handsome for your own good.
Oh, well, look, you need to go to Specsavers. But we're living in incredible times. I've got a great book. There's a woman, one thing that feminists do, they make a lot of people think that any academic woman is actually a silly cow and is actually all the ugly stereotypes of what a sexist would say about women.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a woman here called Janice Fiamingo, and she's written a book called Sons of Feminism, Men Have Their Say. And I consider myself a son of feminism, what I went through and what my sisters went through when we were children. But this is a good book to read because you read on a great variety of different men. She doesn't really write anything in this. It's other men's stories about how their fathers were treated and how they were treated as children. And then you look at the incredible hypocrisy of the ideology of feminism. And like they say, oh, feminism, you're against women if you don't like feminism. Well, no, women are people like men, and feminism's an ideology.
Yeah.
We've got to remember that.
Well, I think you will never see her or people like her on television giving any kind of opinion. That's the thing. There's people who basically, I mean, there's some fantastic
But you see, she's
women,
on. There's incredible people, men and women.
Fantastic.
And they're on
you never
YouTube.
you see them on YouTube. They'll get one chance at a talk show or something like that.
Yeah.
They'll have one go, and that will be it. They'll never get on there
But
again.
most people are getting sick to death of. What about what's the new NPC, non-playable character? Has anyone heard of that?
Yeah.
It's from the gamer community, and it's the gamer community have come up with a lot of things. What do they call that sort of thing? It's called a okay, I've forgotten what it's called. But it means a non-playable character, which means when you meet an extreme left-wing Antifa or someone like that, and they normally in gaming. You have background characters which the computer generates, and they keep repeating what they do. And any interaction with your character in a game, I'm not a gamer, but I've been told this. The generated character does exactly the same thing. And if you ever meet a left-wing extremist, they're exactly the same. They're a non-playable character. You can't actually interact with them. They either scream at you, they insult you, or they hit you. And they call you things like anything they choose, anything they want to. You're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're a sexist, you're a Nazi, and the best answer to that is I'm not a Nazi, I'm a Nancy. And that's what you get. You can't actually communicate with them, and they actually find it quite offensive, and it's actually quite clever. It's called a meme.
Oh, okay.
And it's more than they have another term now. I mean, I talk to a lot of people in other fields of interest. And a lot of them are gamers and that, and they're younger than me, and they have all this stuff. I'm an old fossil compared to them. But it's interesting. And non-playable characters. I mean, the SJW, social justice warrior, sounds like a really good thing. But if you ever meet one, you're not actually got anyone you're going to actually discuss anything with, because their gender studies teacher or their academic ideologue has basically just programmed them with cultural Marxism.
But where does the violence that comes into it? It seems to me
Well,
they basically look go look at the Second World War. At the end of the Second World War, a lot of people with righteous indignation about what had been done, they go out into the streets and commit acts of violence. At that time, taking revenge would be seen as acceptable because it's the end of the war. But basically, they're just taking that attitude from that time and they're just using it.
Well, they think there's a revolution now. They want a Marxist revolution, a lot of these people. And when you look at what Karl Marx, what his work did to Russia, to China, to all over the world, all different peoples, and now it's in Africa. And if you want to talk about the bourgeois, you want to look at the leaders of the Communist Party. They have their own planes. They have the most expensive shoes and the most expensive perfumes, male perfumes.
Well,
And yet their people starve. Because communism's often in a country, starvation follows quite quickly because they couldn't organise a swim in a pool. But they know how to actually take all the money and borrow more. And it fails economically and socially, communism. And not only that, you've got a death toll like you wouldn't know. And of course, we've got the death toll of the Russian peasants and the gulags, which are concentration camps. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn, not quite pronounced it right, the Gulag Archipelago, he reckons, like I said, he reckons up to 66 million Christian peasant Christian peasant Russians were killed in the gulags and all the rest of these things. And we're using the same terminology now in everything. It's horrific.
Why is it so appalling when you look at Nazism and anyone discusses Nazism, we say, oh, it's all disgusting, it's appalling. The same thing can be said about everything that's developed out of Soviet Russia. Nobody says it. They have a completely different attitude.
Germany's become the scapegoat for so much, and what happened was terrible. But if you look at Nazis, National Socialists, so socialism was in there as well, and nationalism. So they say they were just right-wing, so it's not just right-wing.
This lethal combination.
Yeah, but it did work for a while before the wars started. It did work for the German people, because what the Germans went through after the First World War and after the Second World War was appalling. And we forget that. And there's so many people who we consider the enemy, the other peoples of the world, just the public. What they went through was appalling.
Well, for me, the end of the First World War, you're looking at, as I said, it's a financial situation, and it's the squeeze. They've basically won the war between Coke and Pepsi, and now Coke is taking the advantage.
Well, the Ottoman Empire was broken up, and it was the end of a load of empires, including the British Empire. It's just
the red pill?
Now, going back to topic, this lady's drawn us back into topic. The Red Pill's a movie, a film made by a feminist to look into the men's rights movement in America and Canada. And she was a feminist. She still believes in women's rights and all that, but she won't call herself a feminist anymore. And the movie is all about her journey as she's interviewing men and women in the men's rights movement, and coming to terms with what we were saying, what these professional people in the men's rights are actually saying about how men are treated because of feminism, and how feminism is an ideology, and how appalling it is to the family and to human rights.
What do you believe?
I believe feminism's an ideology. I think that women are people like men. I think feminism's done so much damage to our society. The founding part of a society is a relationship between a man and a woman and their children. And it's the basis of our society. And we've destroyed, feminism's destroyed that. It's demonized men, and it's told women that they're historical victims forever, which is actually not true. Most people were victims. Men and women face different things, face different difficulties. And the thing is, the feminist lens. I call it the feminist lens cap, because all you ever see is one thing. And it's mainly from upper class women. We're not talking about working class women, what they think. It's Poppy Day today. 100 years ago or so, here we had the suffragettes here, handing out white feathers to men who weren't in uniform, men and boys who weren't in uniform. They were all upper class women. And the movie, The Suffragettes, was a propaganda movie. The suffragists were the ones who wanted men and women to get the vote. Most men in the First World War, up to about 50%, didn't have the vote who were in the war. Men never used to have the vote. When Queen Victoria took the throne, only 2 to 3% of men had the vote. Landowners had the vote. And women also had decision-making in that, because a lot of landowners had wives, and their wives were probably held property as well. It was a different world then.
You're in a lot of pain.
Me? I know, I'm also in the wind as well. Yeah, I've had something recently come up in my private life about my childhood and that, about one of the reasons why I do this, being in care and stuff, and talking about that actually it goes both ways. Women is just as damaging as men can be, but they can get away with a hell of a lot that men don't. And we need to look at the importance of fathers and masculinity in families, as well as women and femininity. And when you tell a woman that she's a victim, you're actually disabling her. Most women who get up and go, they don't believe themselves victims. If you teach someone that the world's against you and you're a victim, you're not going to do that well. So it's a complex issue, but this movie is very good, The Red Pill. Because
Is that your movie?
It's mine. Pardon?
Is that your movie?
No, it's not my movie. No. The woman who made it is a filmmaker. She's American, I think, not Canadian.
Okay.
But you can get it online. It's worth seeing because it's a good gradient for people who are looking at this from the start who've never actually looked into it. And the whole movie was meant to be a hit piece against the men's rights, because everyone assumed that men's rights activists We're women haters. We're misogynists.
What if we stopped hating everyone?
Well, see, that is a nice thing to say, and it's a good thing to say with young children to make children think. But
What if it could be that simple?
if it could be that simple, but people aren't that simple.
What if they could be?
We're
What
complex.
if you could be?
Well, it's a silly thing to say as well. It's a nice thing to say, but people aren't like that. People are complex things.
Can you be like that?
Probably not. No, but I've got certain demands on myself on how I conduct
So
myself.
you'll always be a victim then?
In what way do you mean that?
Well, if you say that I can never stop hating,
No, no, I don't hate people.
then you're
I
saying
hate
I'll
it.
always be a victim.
I hate the
I was
ideology.
saying, what if you stopped hating in general?
Well, the reason sometimes when you
What if you
dislike
stop
something,
talking now and just imagine for one moment that you could stop hating and be free?
but it would also, I wouldn't be free, no, because I actually know what feminism does to a lot of people's lives. I have a responsibility to speak.
Then you'd be at a disadvantage.
Because a lot of people who come from backgrounds
Everyone could attack you.
where they aren't, who have suffered when they were young, they need to speak out and say, well, these things aren't right, we need to improve them if we can. Nothing can be entirely improved.
One who lays down their arms.
Everything keeps you need to keep evolving things slightly. And to say, well, what if people didn't hate is a very childlike thing to say, because men and women come from different backgrounds. There are people who are damaged, there are people who are hurt, there are people who don't see other people as being worth anything, and they mistreat people or exploit people. So how can everyone just care? We're not just cardboard cutouts, we're complex things. And anyway, so you're going to watch this movie, lady?
One side lays down their arms. The other side agreed to do so.
Oh yes. I've been coming here about nearly 5 years now. My name's Rod, and I'm a men's rights activist and anti-feminist. And I come here every fortnight with my friends, with a bunch of guys that do the same thing. We're all very different. We're not an organised group, but we work alongside each other. I think Speakers Corner is an incredibly important place, and they had other Speakers Corners in other parts of the world. We used to be able to do it at Tower Hill, if I'm correct. It's really important that you actually get people speaking. There's going to be some changes made soon here, apparently, and I'm hoping, and it's to do with filming and things like that, and I'm hoping that they don't stop it, because the police and everything is so afraid every time there's a fracas or there's violence or there's stuff done on the internet with hate. But the thing is, when it goes on video, it gives a wider audience, which makes Speakers Corner more important. It's really important for people to get up and say things. And as long as they're not trying to deliberately cause a riot and have people hurt, they should have a right to say things, which may be offensive to some people, but then can be debated. Because you've always got the right to you're given a position then to disprove somebody. And even the person who's saying those things might learn something over time, if they're incorrect, or if they're too extreme in their belief systems. So it's good. I mean, yeah, and I think it's slowly improving, Speakers Corner. It's less religious than it used to be. It's always been political and religious, so I think it's good. I'm hoping, I don't think the authorities like Speakers Corner. It makes them nervous. The local toilets, which are underground and that, aren't open, so it doesn't really encourage, it's not very user-friendly. I think I'm frightened that they're going to close Speakers Corner down because they're frightened of people saying things which might offend others.
I think it's more the threat of what people are saying more than...
What they're saying, yep, very much so. And people who won't tolerate you questioning anything, and so they behave badly, and so the police buckle and say, well, then we shouldn't be saying those things. Well, actually... Yeah, well, if somebody says something I don't like, it doesn't mean it gives me the reason to kick off and start throwing things and playing up or writing horrible things and threatening their families or anything. If I behave like that, I should get in a lot of trouble. And the same goes for everyone else. Speakers Corner actually has an awful lot to do with the interesting and important things about Britain. The right of freedom of speech, the right to say what you feel, And we recently had a big thing here with people praying here when you're not meant to have religious services in the royal parks without permission, I think. I think that's the basis of it. And that was challenged here by two people, and they were both treated quite badly for it, but they actually did make a change because they were both brave enough. One was an old, middle-aged older lady, and one was a guy, a Chinese Malaysian guy, who is tan. Tan's a bit of a wild card, but actually I really liked him, and he is incredibly offensive, and he's offensive to everybody. It is a bit on the nose, yes, some of the things he says, but the common sense, Chinese common sense is actually a breath of fresh air to somebody who's a Caucasian Westerner.
What good did it do him? He turned everyone against him. He turned the Muslims didn't like him.
Yeah, but
the right wing.
What good it?
He turned the blacks against him. He turned the right wing against him.
Yeah, but he came here and he actually said a few things, and he had some good points to make. Everyone hated him, and he offended everyone.
He did.
But he actually gave everyone a little bit more confidence to be a little bit more honest about what they feel. And I think that's a good thing. I think he was one of the best things that's happened here, even though he offended people. And to be quite honest, what's wrong with being offended? Are we so babyish that we can't be offended? This is with universities, with safe spaces and deplatforming. Oh, you can't say that, somebody might get hurt. Absolute crap.
I think though, like, probably, you know, me and you have developed those critical thinking skills that we don't mind getting offended, but other people haven't been raised that way.
Well,
especially people from other cultures.
Then they need to start learning to have a thicker skin.
I think that's the problem.
If somebody says your mum looks like the back end of a wolf, it doesn't mean that you want to chop them up. If they say that, well, you say, well, either I agree with you, or you've never met my mum. If they said it to her in a house while she was making them a cup of tea, then that's different. That's offensive. But if someone's going to say something about your family, your religion, or anything like that, then you just think, well, okay. If they keep on at you and keep pecking at you and won't leave you alone, then that's a different thing. But we actually have a right to actually say what we feel, and if it offends somebody, it either might make the person who's offending them think, or the other person who's on the end of it. This kowtowing to the most violent people is disastrous.
Kowtowing, what do you mean by that?
By bowing to somebody who's going to get really a bully.
What's wrong with being respectful to others, though?
It's a very good thing, but we are at Speaker's Corner, and one thing Speaker's Corner has never been is respectful to others.
But it's also, that's the thing about freedom. If you have too much freedom, it can be chaotic. And that's what happens. Look at Speaker's Corner.
Yeah, but Speaker's Corner is a place to be chaotic, and it's a very important place. Well, you look at the Houses of Parliament when they're actually going through some new process, and it turns into like a basically screaming match in a schoolyard where everyone's booing and heckling and blah, blah. Now, it's an important thing to go through. You need to be able to stand up and have the strength to say, because if your point's not worth standing up for, you shouldn't pull in someone else to defend you. And so to get your way, you have to be able to stand up, and there'll be someone somewhere who will know what they're talking about, who will actually stand up and say it.
I respect what you're saying, but the thing about something like Speaker's Corner, people are, and you've admitted it yourself, it is chaotic. So sometimes you need one voice for order to happen, for society to work.
And it is chaotic, and people come here for entertainment.
Yes.
And it can be very funny
but
as well.
But it's not really practical, though, is it?
It's incredibly practical. It's incredibly...
That's why
early in the 1900s, and after before the wars and the First World War, we had a lot of different diverse types of Christianity, and the amount of debating and we had the suffrage movement for the men, and then the suffrage movement for the women, and men and women getting the vote. We had all this. All this was really important, and there were fights here all the time. You had 100 times the people you got here now at times here, especially when it was looking at men getting the vote and then women getting the vote. Now, they were chaotic times. Look, changing things where it's going to actually benefit some people and it'll always not benefit others. And sometimes they're more powerful. It is a fight, but it's actually a fight of words where people are actually discussing things, and doing it that way is better than actually people attacking each other and trying to murder each other and wipe each other out later. This is where the fight should be, with words and with the brain, where you're clever enough and articulate enough. I don't think I'm that greatly articulate, but the thing is I do know what I'm talking about to a point. And I discuss other things which I know a little bit about, and someone could summarize. Some of the hardest people to actually debate with are upper class business people who are well educated. They don't actually know that much about the topic, but they're very good at winning an argument, and they're quite classy people through their education. And I'm just working class. But if you know what you're talking about, you can beat someone like that. It's really, when you have this diverse mix of ideas and feelings and passion and emotion and anger, which is really important. It's not wrong to express anger. If you never express anger, you're going to end up in the right mess.
But that's the thing, that people will get offended. Like,
Good.
For example,
People need to be offended sometimes.
Let me give you an example. A lot of, like, for example, Christians and Muslims, they've been raised all their lives to respect their religious holy figures.
Yeah.
And then when someone calls them, that religious figure, a paedophile, for example, they're gonna get, it hurts them. It's really hurtful.
Well, then
and they're going to react. And they're allowed to react then.
And they should react with an argument.
Yes, but not in a violent way. Which, you know.
And see, if they get used to the fact that people will question them and talk about historical events and read things, because theoretically, when we actually look at the laws today, in the past, people had wives and that at a much younger age. And older men, often powerful men, had very, very young wives. Very, very different thing. And from our point of view today, it's actually factually correct when someone says that. And it does offend them. Well, they're then going to have to actually have an argument to back it up. Well, they're going to have to think about things.
Right. Does anything offend you personally?
Oh, yes, quite a few things offend me personally. That woman who said, "Why are you ever going to stop hating?" I hate feminism, but that gives me the energy. And I hate the waste and the waste of lives of men and women, and especially children who are dragged all over the place when they should be actually having in a loving family. See, one of the things about the Muslims, they do actually understand about how important family is. And that's one of why I talk to Muslims about that. They actually understand that. They don't like abortion at the drop of a hat. In our society, and a lot of women use it as a form of contraception in the West, and I think that's wrong. That's my opinion. I'm not a woman, no, but there's a lot of women who are against it too. But a lot of people who are pro-abortion are really violent, and there's a lot of footage of it from America. And anywhere you've got anything worth debating, you're going to get arguments, you're going to get people who want to fight. The thing is, where they're in a position where it's not, if they're going to fight, then they should pay the consequences for it, which is one of the reasons why they may not start punching. They may actually improve their argument and come back. You look at Milo Yiannopoulos, the guy, he offended a lot of people.
He did.
But he's also very funny, and this offending people. I mean, what do feminists do to men? They slag masculinity, men off, they say men are violent, there's nothing good about the patriarchy, and all of that.
Not all feminists. There are some feminists who are like that.
Well, the one thing that all different types of feminism have, from the most extreme to a lady who actually believes in women's rights and says, because everybody believes in women's rights, but we don't believe in men's rights. The one thing they all have in common is the patriarchy theory. Is that the patriarchy theory is there the patriarchy is there to exploit women. That's what they believe. It's not there. It's there to protect women and protect our society. Women are protected in patriarchy. Our society has changed greatly, and now everybody has opportunities when in the past we didn't.
I mean, my personal belief is that women don't have the same. Women. We should treat women equally to men.
Yeah.
They may not have the same abilities. They may even have more abilities than men. But we should try our best to have an equal society as possible.
There's one word. It's called respect. And often women make different choices to men. And women don't understand men either. They don't know, most women, some women do, but a lot of women don't understand how important masculinity is and how important rough and tumble is for boys. And important when boys actually learn to fight, to stand up for themselves, because often when they're older, the only person who's going to solve a problem is going to be a man. A lot of women won't walk in and get themselves into danger. And men are very quick to put themselves into a dangerous situation to sort it out because they know it's right. And a lot of women won't, even though they think they will. And even on there, we've got all
Can you give me an example?
Well, often when there's a fire or something, a lot of women will actually not go in and rescue people. Often there's been fires where women's children...
I mean,
they don't put themselves in the same risk.
If there was a child, lots of women have...
There's been situations where a woman's had a fire and a child's been there, and she's relied on a lad to go up the stairs to get the kid because she won't.
What?
And it might have a lot to do with their fitness and their age and all the rest of it, but a lot of women don't. Some women
Why
do.
don't they? They just what? Are they cowardly?
No. It's a lot of people would have said that. No, men and women are different. And men have always been used as an disposable sex.
Men have been used as a disposable sex.
Yeah. Where the men are the ones who actually die to protect the family, and the women. They always say with the women and children first. And when the Titanic went down, almost about 75% of the women, including poor women, survived. 75% of the men drowned, including the rich men. So everybody got the women in the lifeboats, the women and the children.
Because they were at that time, they were more vulnerable. And
no, they weren't. They would have been tough nuts in those days. God, what with the poverty?
Well, they weren't generally built to be strong.
Rubbish. Have you ever met a violent woman? Women are quite capable. A woman who's violent. So the thing is with domestic violence, it's almost 50-50. Women and men in domestic violence, it's not just men.
I don't believe that. I don't think it's 50-50.
Erin Pizzey opened the first battered women's home over in Chiswick there in the 1970s. The first 100 badly battered women, she gets into a shelter. She finds out that 62 of them out of the 100 are as violent as the men. And the thing is, it's not as she says, it's not a gender problem, it's a generational problem. People being brought up in violent families.
Do you agree that men are generally stronger than women?
I don't really think that matters because, and the reason it doesn't, it's about intention. There are a lot of martial artists are small people. You wouldn't mess with them. It's not about size, and they're obviously trained. It's not about size, it's about intention. If you come, a big guy can often get beaten up by somebody who's smaller because they haven't got the intention to hurt. Like, if you want to win a fight, you've got to really want to hurt that person or win.
I think the statistics show that there's a lot more domestic abuse from men than from women.
Yeah, there's a bit more, but women do an awful lot of domestic.
No,
not a lot more. Women do an awful, because everything is run by the Duluth model, which comes from the town in America, which is a fraudulent model. And even one of the three feminists says in a book that it was fraudulent when they actually put it together. And it blames men for everything. It says men are the problem, women have problems.
Let me give you an example. For example, sexual slavery. It's a lot more about women trafficking, from Eastern Europe and Europe.
Some men are trafficked as well. But have you ever known that often brothels are run by women as well? And there are actually women involved. Yes, I'd say more men are doing it.
Right.
But we use traffic. A lot of people, trafficking has been another thing used. A lot of people come to this country and they make out they were trafficked here. There are people who are trafficked. There's an awful lot of people trafficked to Saudi Arabia as servants, and they take their passport.
That's horrible.
That's slavery.
That's slavery.
We've still got slavery in the world today.
That's wrong.
Yeah,
that's terrible.
Of course it's wrong. And they tend to go to the women from Malaysia and that get used, and men as well.
Philippines, yeah.
Yeah, and also there's a lot of men from India who are used as slaves in these poor men, I don't know, the lower caste, are used in other countries as workmen on worksites and things.
Yeah, and so there's no safety or anything.
But the thing is, we have feminists, I've got a great, I'll read something to you. I'll put my goggles on, if I can find it, because I'm terrible at finding things. The men's rights movement has been around since the 1800s, and it's never really taken off. There were huge alimony frauds done for years, and there are a lot of people against it, men and women, where wealthier women were able to take advantage of men horribly, financially. Men and women, you've got good and bad in both. It goes both ways. And when you keep punishing often men who are not bad, by women who are bad get let off. It's absolutely horrific. It just destroys everybody's lives, men and women. I shall read something which is...
I accept that there can be false, for example, you're talking about rape, false rape accusations.
Oh, there's an awful lot of, there's an epidemic of false rape.
I also think there's a lot of rape that goes unreported by men.
Oh, yeah, a lot of women actually force their husbands to have sex, but that's not seen as bad.
I find that hard to believe.
I know you would. There's a lot of men who are very dominated by partners, by women, or by... it depends. A lot of men are actually... We always assume that men are these great tough things. A lot of men don't know how to fight. A lot of men are not aggressive. A lot of men are pussies, basically.
What's wrong in being not aggressive? What's
No,
wrong
there's
with-
nothing wrong with that, but I'm saying what we do is...
Why do we have to be aggressive?
No,
Why do we
people
have to act
look down on men who are not strong. Women mock men who are weak. Showing weakness when you're a man disgusts people often. And that's one thing, the empathy gap that we have for men is absolutely awful. I'm going to find this eventually, and I'll keep talking while I'm going. It's just, there's so much stuff that we don't look at because we've been so brainwashed by, and when we look at the prison populations, I can read, I mean, I've got good stuff in here, but it's not really Reader's Corner, is it? Speaker's Corner.
Take your time.
I'm still getting there, and I'll be there in a moment. I'll bet it'll be the last bloody page. It shouldn't be. Hypergamy. There we go, we're getting there. Sorry about this. Now ask me a question so I can talk to you while I'm looking.
Yeah, no, just, have you suffered personally from
Oh yes, very much as a child, by a woman who was basically a devious criminal.
So could that have biased your view about women in general?
Oh, well, no, you could say that, and
Because
I've been accused of that before, but...
From my perspective, I've been treated really well by women, by my mother, by my wife, you know.
Well, then you're a lucky man, and there's a lot of women who are actually very good people, like there are a lot of men.
And my mother sacrificed everything for my father and for myself and my brother.
And that's what most people, because you come from a more traditional family. But see, the thing is, they say, well, oh, it's because of your background you're doing this. No, there's a huge amount of men, often men who aren't that articulate, who are damaged, who don't actually speak about what happens. Now listen to this. This is Ernest Balfour Bax, and he was vehemently opposed to women's suffrage. And, oh, there we go, no, I'm way ahead. Ernest Balfour Bax from 1854 to 1925. He was a prominent barrister. And you've got to remember, you've got to take this in the times and how people, especially people officially spoke and their attitudes. He was appalled by the situation he found in England, that women were committing heinous crimes and were being acquitted because of their sex. Bax was the first to identify and classify that the two notable hypocrisies of what he called modern feminism, political feminism and sentimental feminism. Bax observed that in political feminism, feminists claim that women were physically, intellectually and the moral equals of men, and therefore should have all the rights, the same rights. However, he also observed that when women committed heinous crimes or were confronted with danger, that feminists sought for women to receive special treatment because they were weaker than men. Sound familiar? Ernest Balfour Bax was vehemently opposed to women's suffrage. He argued that women were not the moral equals of men and could not be trusted to care for men's interests in the same way that men's notion of chivalry cared for women's interests. He argued that if women were given the franchise, they would oppress and disadvantage men, and that women would seek to rule men as tyrants. Bax also believed that women were incapable of expressing true remorse. He noted that women always maintained that whatever crime they committed was justified, that they were experts at blaming the victims of their atrocities. He also observed that women who committed heinous crimes would only resort to tears when their justifications could not bear fruit, and that their tears were only a manifestation of their self-interest in seeking leniency or acquittal. Does that sound familiar?
Do you believe that if women had the chance, if they had the power, they would be tyrants over men?
They are already.
They already are.
Men don't have the rights that women do. And if you only need to look at law, any accusation that a woman makes against a man is believed.
No, that's not true.
It is believed. Look at that woman recently. What was her name?
It's listened to and then it goes to a court.
Let's look at the woman recently. What was her name?
But no, you've got to listen.
Christine Blasey Ford. Yeah, absolute bullshit ass, a professional woman, and the yearbook was taken off the internet about when she was at college, a year younger than that bloke who she went after, Brett Kavanaugh, and she was a big party animal back then, Drinks, drugs, rock and roll, loads of sex. They took that down
you
because
know
it
all
wouldn't make
that.
her look good.
You know all that.
No, that was
You
in the
researched
yearbook.
it.
No, it was in the yearbook, and they took it down, and someone actually got it before they took it down, madam. And that's why they know that.
Understand.
Are you saying she wasn't raped? You know that
Of
for a
course
fact?
she wasn't. She
Okay,
and
sexually
she
assaulted.
lied, and she lied, and she couldn't even put an argument.
How do you know she
How do
lied?
you know she lied?
When she remembers being at a party, but maybe someone touched her, and she's convinced, but it can't remember where it was or when it was, but it was definitely.
And her friends couldn't back her up.
Definitely him.
And her friends couldn't back her up, and all that stuff about how she couldn't fly because she couldn't be in a place without 2 doors and an escape route, and even down to her own home. A load of old fanny, the lot of it. And she was an opportunist, and it was a political move to get rid of Brett Kavanaugh. And if this is a man who's a privileged, articulate guy at the top. Guys who are just average men would go down, would be flushed down the toilet in a second, and it happens all the time with false rape accusations. Rape.
He was a man with a wife and children.
Yeah.
He was a good family
Yeah,
man.
and the thing is,
Just
Rape-
because he has a wife and children doesn't mean he can't be
No, let's-
capable of that.
So rape
Let's
is
agree.
not a
Let's-
problem.
let's-
It's not an issue.
What's that?
Men do not
no,
rape
rape
women.
is a
They have
horrible
no
crime.
Ah.
Rape is a horrible
Ah,
crime.
okay.
It is a violent crime.
And are
it
you-
is a sex
and are you
crime.
an expert?
And by
Are you
by
an expert on the
expanding
psychological
the definition.
effects of rape?
And most
are you
psychological
an expert on
experts
that?
on it are feminists, and they are biased. And
you're-
they've been expanding the definition of
And
what
you
the horrible
understand
crime
the
is
female
for years.
psyche after that aggression.
Stop pulling out the ladies' card. Men suffer terribly by false accusations, and it's terrible. We should care about everybody. And if a woman is raped, it's a horrible crime, and whoever does it should be punished. But you don't, if anyone makes an accusation, we don't assume the man is guilty. We actually, he has to be proven guilty.
Look at
That's the law.
that I agree with.
Good, good.
But when you're running for one of the highest offices, you do require an impeccable
And a con
impeccable
woman,
account.
and a con woman who's made a load of money out of it should be punished.
Only women should be punished.
No,
Men don't make
no. If he turned out to have been a rapist, and if it turned out that he did rape her, then he should have not got that position, and he should have been punished for it.
But
That's what should have happened.
Most often you can't prove it, and
No,
most
most
men go
often
free.
it's a very,
Most men go free.
and most no rubbish.
Probably one day at some party somewhere you think something happened, but it was definitely that man. Then yes,
And she couldn't remember getting there, going home, who took her
You
there.
hardly ever get to definitely in cases like that. Most cases you don't
That's-
know, you don't have an idea. It's his word against her word.
And listen and believe hashtags from women. You must believe every woman. Men and women, there are bad women and bad men.
That's
It goes
for sure.
both. And you
That's
can't
for
just listen and believe. That's why we have a court process.
That's for sure.
That's why we have
But
to
these
have a fair
cases
court.
happen to be problematic. To
They are
some
very problematic, and they're very emotive for everybody. But that woman appears to be a con woman,
I
and
don't
it nearly
agree. I
ruined
see it
him.
differently.
And he had women standing up for him. And yes,
Where's your proof that she's a,
I don't
she's
know,
a
like-
she made
with
that
all the details that have come out, which are not on the BBC, which are not on CNN, all the details that come out. Has she?
now he's been appointed. She said, oh, maybe I was wrong.
Oh,
Yeah.
and she should be punished.
That's not publicised. It won't be.
And if he wasn't as powerful and as he was, and he didn't have the support, he wouldn't have got that position, and his life would have been ruined, and his family would have gone down the toilet with him.
I mean, the fact is that he was investigated and he was found not innocent of that. So the law worked.
Found not innocent.
He was found innocent.
Yes, he was found
Yeah.
innocent.
Yeah, so the
yes,
law
but
worked.
everyone is still accusing him of it, and you have these hashtag listen believe things,
It's okay that his life sent into turmoil by false accusations.
and they mocked him when he was upset.
It's not okay. It's sad that but these sort of things need to be investigated because
And it was.
because that's,
And
so
she
the law
appeared
works.
to be a sociopath. People don't like punishing women, even bad women. We like punishing men,
Women have been punished all the years.
and men have always been punished.
Now, since Me Too, there's a
Rubbish.
change.
No.
And men are
Women
so
have always
threatened by
been more
it.
protected.
God forbid
Women
that
have always been more
Oh,
protected in
that
every
is really a
society
bunch of
than men.
baloney.
Now,
that is
that
a
is
big
not.
bunch of baloney.
Feminism
Women have
is-
been
says-
consistently oppressed.
they do not.
Without rights.
Men love women.
Now it's
Men have always
changing.
loved women. Our
Now it's
society has
changing.
always oppressed
And
working
men are
class
not
people.
comfortable with the change.
Rubbish.
Men have always had rights.
Rubbish.
Always.
Oh, yes.
Women have only recently had rights.
Biggest victims of
What a load of rubbish. Men.
victims of murder, men. biggest proportion sent off to fight and die are men.
Men are the ones that make the war. Men are the ones that can admit
Oh God, you really are a bit
Men are the
outdated
ones-
in your believing. You're a radical feminist. You're a sexist. You're a terrible sexist. And it's time that we
That's
challenge
what I think
this.
about you.
Well, I don't care what you think. You're wrong.
Oh, there you go.
This is the thing. This is the trouble with feminism. It's been demonizing men for so long. And the historical belief that men have always oppressed women throughout time and throughout history is complete rubbish. There have been bad men in the world, but there are also bad women. And we actually look at women being innocent and men being demonized. And there's the biological reason why we're quite happy to punish a bad man. And it's good to get a bad guy. But if how many women who do wrong look like the bad women? It's normally a woman who's overweight or unattractive who gets punished.
I think in most cases
of us
of rape,
sympathise
it's the
with a
man.
woman that we're more likely to sympathise with women because most men adore women. All men adore women. Everybody.
Men adore women.
Yes, they do. It's very rare. And the men who do tend out to be psychopathic murderers.
You believe that more women rape men than men rape women?
Women have different things they do. A lot of women force sex on men when they don't want it. And you find that amusing. We have no empathy for men.
Give an example of that, of a woman forcing
Well,
herself
there's a
on
lot
a
of examples on it. There's a lot of men who talk about how they've been raped by their wives or they've been forced to have sex with a woman. See, your mindset is that a woman is a little delicate thing and a man is some big, powerful thing. Most men don't have great power. Women sexually assault men all the time.
As far as I know, women and men are physically.
It's not about strength. It's about intention.
Rape is
it's
not about
a
strength.
intention. A real rapist uses his strength
They could
to
be.
do it.
They could be shot. They could be knifed. But it's laughable that they could be raped.
It is not. You are really. I do have something, if I can find it again, to read out from, which says a lot about. Here we go. Now this is from a guy called Glenn Poole, and let me get my goggles on so I know what I'm looking at. I might be making that up as I go along, and she probably thinks I am. She'll give me a badge in a minute. Glenn Poole wrote this. Okay, a boy is born more likely to die before the age of 1 than a girl. He is more likely to be rejected or removed from his family. He is 25% more likely to be taken into a care than a girl. He is 25% less likely to get out of care by being adopted. At school, he is twice as likely to have a special educational need. At school, he is twice as likely to have literacy problems. He is 4 times more likely to be excluded from school. At the time he reaches 16, he is more likely to be in youth unemployment than a girl or a young woman. Number 9, he is 2.5 more times more likely to die before he is 25 than a girl. 10, he is less likely to be a graduate. If he is more likely to be unemployed when he comes out of university. 11, 3 times more likely to commit suicide than a woman. 12, twice as likely to be a victim of a violent crime. 13, he is more likely to be killed by a stranger or someone he knows. 71% of murder victims are men. 14, he is 4 times more likely to become an alcoholic and 3 times more likely to become a cannabis addict. 15, 95% of people in prison are men. Male prison population, 27% were in care. 20 to 30% have learning difficulties. 50% are addicts. 60 to 70% are fatherless and had no real male role model. 90% likely to have been excluded from school. 90% of men in prison have some kind of mental health problem. Now, we don't talk about things like that. It's called the empathy gap. We do not give a damn about what happens to men. Now, we had one of the parliamentarian guys, our first international men's conference in 2007, 2016, we had Philip Davis come to the conference, the first politician to join us. We international conference, all the top people from all over the world. He heard that women were being treated badly in courts. So what he did, he used the libraries at Parliament to find out. And he actually found out the complete opposite. 5 out of 6 men in prison wouldn't be in prison if they were treated as leniently as women are treated when they're in the court system. Women get suspended sentencing all the time, even for the most violent crimes. And he read a book by a woman who was a ratbag who was in prison, and she said in the book, he didn't know this, in the weekends they let the women out to visit their children. And that woman said, sometimes there's hardly anybody in here. Now, the population, prison population in Britain, I think it's about 3,500 are women, and it's about 80,000 are men. And even since the times of Moira Henley, they've been trying to close women's prisons and have a more holistic